Chasing shadows where the seeds are sown. Fingers tapping on a Ouija board. Broken silence like a shattered chord. Eerie hums in the dead of night. Is it truth or just a trick of sight?
Wow, hello. That went very smooth.
Yeah.
That's creepy.
For a
Well,
change.
hello everybody. Welcome to another Things Paranormal Talks, and whole new one. I'm back from holiday.
Welcome back, Shane.
Thank you. Today we have a, for me, amazing guest, and his name is Professor Cal Cooper. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on.
My pleasure.
It's not every day you have a professor in your show. So as always, I'm going to ask you, who are you? Can you explain who you are and what do you do?
Yeah, I'm a psychologist first and foremost in my training, chartered with the British Psychological Society, and a fellow of them. But I'm based at the University of Northampton, so in the pretty much just bottom of the Midlands of the UK, where for a very long time, since 1996, we've had a taught course in the psychology curriculum on parapsychology. That's still going now. And we've got a large group of researchers there involved in parapsychology within the psychology department. I supervise a number of PhDs in that area. My own PhDs have focused on elements of parapsychology, one more than the other. And I'm also based at the Californian Institute for Human Science, where Dr. Jeffrey Mishlove and myself co-direct parapsychology education there for the master's and doctoral programs that we've got there. So that's me. That's what I do. My day-to-day work is as a psychologist, and my main focus is on parapsychology, so looking at strange experiences and abilities that people have. But I also specialize in death, dying, and bereavement. So there's natural overlaps there, especially experiences around death. And then also positive psychology, so our emotions and how we use them to our benefit, and also sexual behavior as well. So that's my main stuff. A bit of cyber psychology as well.
That's a lot.
Plate spinning.
Yeah. My head is spinning now.
You already did it now. It's all spinning around.
First time.
What made you go into parapsychology in the first place?
I suppose psychology, aside from parapsychology, was my fallback, because I started out with an intent for performing arts and stage performance. So I've always loved theatre and drama. So I did that and did kind of side education on the top of what I was doing at school. I was doing side stuff with acting academies, and did small performances. I made some horror films at college and stuff that got shown at the Broadway cinema in Nottingham, and really enjoyed that. But I think it was one of those things that I never dived in at the deep end with, and just committed myself to it no matter what. And I certainly didn't want to go down the route of getting an education in acting, thinking, oh, because you've got a degree, you'll get... I knew that actually, if I was going to go down the route of acting, I needed to just go to a lot of auditions and put myself forward that way. And then, opportunities might come along. And so I took on a psychology degree as something useful to have. Never bothered going to any auditions at all, because I was so engrossed in what I was doing. But I picked a university that supported parapsychology as one of their many aspects of study within that degree. So I looked at a number of different ones in the UK and settled for the University of Northampton. And I think I did look at a few acting things that came up, but very quickly, I think within the first year of me studying, what I was achieving in parapsychology led to media attention. I got into the BBC News, international news, for getting the Eileen J. Garrett Scholarship from the Parapsychology Foundation. And so all of a sudden I was doing loads of BBC radio shows where they were fascinated, as they termed it, with this paranormal scholarship. And explaining what that was. And I realized, actually, I quite like this, where I've got an outlet to speak to the public, but I'm performing as me, but with the skeptic hat on and with the parapsychology hat on, and translating science into something that's digestible for the public to understand. So how do I explain the science of unusual experiences? How would I explain what research is being done with sex behavior or positive psychology or death studies? How can I make that enjoyable, palatable, for everybody? And so there I found a platform, really, and opportunities just kept coming my way. And I just became very good at networking as well. So I've met a lot of people over time that are involved in acting, or they're well known in the media for science, and things have just grown that way. So I stuck with parapsychology, even though people said don't as a career path, because there's just not enough jobs in there. They're so scarce, let alone psychology. But I ended up in a dead man's boot situation where usually they'd say, well, you probably only get that position if somebody died and you replace them. Well, a couple of my peers, one retired and one of them moved to go and cover other parapsychology work at the University of Greenwich. So then I stepped up to the mark and sort of became an assistant to Professor Chris Rowe back in 2012. So after my graduation and getting my master's degree and starting my PhD journey, and I started leading the parapsychology module and getting more and more involved. And so I've been planted at the University of Northampton ever since. Even as an undergraduate, I was doing research assistant stuff. I was a research assistant for a remote viewing project and also for a psychokinesis study as well. So that's the ability to allegedly influence things with the mind alone. So whether it's computer systems or, trying to bend a pencil with your mind or a piece of metal like a spoon, things like that. We were working on computer systems. So my first major paid job in the university was for parapsychology. And still to this day, it's my full-time job as a parapsychologist.
That's so cool.
Yeah,
Oh,
definitely.
thanks.
Yeah, it is.
Probably sounds more interesting than it might be, but that's my job, and it's just full of books all the time. I'm more a historian than anything, or at least I feel it. But even then, I do a lot of lab research for my PhD students. But my heart belongs to the history of this and where we're going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you deal with a part like remote viewing as a skeptic person, because you are skeptic as well?
I think any scientist of any field, if I was involved in geography, you need to be a skeptic. If you're involved in chemistry, you need to be a skeptic. If I was a midwife, I want to be skeptical. What am I being skeptical of, though, in those domains? The methods that we use, the procedures we use, our ethical guidelines, are they good enough? Everything that you do, you should apply some skepticism to say, am I doing this to the best of my abilities? Am I doing it well enough to protect me and the people that I interact with? Am I interpreting my data and my findings in the best way possible? Or actually, am I seeing them this way, but I'm so blinkered by what I'm doing and not looking for alternatives or thinking outside the box that actually the data is over here? And that's what the outcomes are. So skepticism is really useful for essentially critically thinking through how best you're doing things and whether you're really getting the outcomes that you think you're getting. So when we say the word skeptic, a lot of people should realize it's not just, as I suppose a lot of people on the internet would think, a debunker who goes around saying that's not happening, this isn't happening, that medium isn't talking to the dead, and people aren't seeing ghosts. That's not what a skeptic is about. That could be someone that's very ill-informed and dogmatic. And to be a skeptic, you really need to know the subject that you're dealing with. So usually a subject expert is their own best skeptic because they know what they're talking about in the first place. But working with colleagues, collaborating, and sometimes with other fields of science can help you see things in a different way. And that's why at school, we always struggle with feedback from our teacher, all the way through to when you're at university and you've got lecturers. The more feedback they give you, the harder they're working. And if you just work one by one through everything they have to say, you learn from it and you refine what you've written, and it gets better because you've just got years of experience that's directly told you what you are or aren't doing right and how to deal with it. And that's good skepticism, of that refining and dealing with it, changing your perspective and moving forward with it. So you asked with remote viewing, how would I kind of approach that with skepticism? Well, like anything else, really, my role when we did the initial remote viewing trials was to send people through two different procedures. One that was similar to what the military did, when they were sending soldiers through remote viewing programs, and then take that same person through a process that we call Gansfeld, where they lay in a reclining chair in a soundproof chamber. It's all dark, and they've got red light beaming down and eye shields on, and their eyes are open, and it feels like lay on a beach with your eyes shut, and the sun is beaming down, and it's nice and warm and calming, and you see a pink haze, and you're listening to relaxation music, getting you to stretch your arms and then your legs and your back for 15 minutes, and then you just listen to pink noise, just this reduced hiss, and you know that the aim is to travel somewhere in your mind and to just speak out loud and describe it, or someone, maybe if it was a telepathy study, is trying to send you something, an image of anything. With remote viewing, it could be that a friend or relative has actually gone to the location selected. You're told they're walking around and interacting with it. They're picking up everything or touching walls and trying to send it to you. So that's the procedure. And need for skepticism with that is, well, how do we deal with that kind of data? How do you actually put that in a laboratory? Well, typically we've dealt with postcards and images through to then random video clips. And when people go through this remote viewing procedure, there is a video clip selected in the future. It's an hour after the study is finished. So we use precognition, ideas of seeing the future, as a safeguard to protect from cheating and fraud, because it doesn't happen until afterwards, which is great that we use a parapsychological thing to safeguard cheating and fraud and error as an element of skepticism there. And so it's a 1 in 4 guess. So 25% by guesswork should be the overall outcome. And doing these kinds of studies over many years, they have averages of 38 to 45% success rate, which is really interesting. These things that are said in remote viewing in the Gansfeld, they're all written down and they do drawings, and it's compared against the 4 clips with a judge who looks at all of them and watches them and does not know which one is the target. So they have to rank order the best one to the worst one over and over again. So you've got this independent judging going on, and you can compare multiple judges. So, that's how great the skepticism has grown. This has refined itself ever since the 1920s with the original Xenocard studies. So the star, the cross, the wavy line, the circle, and the square, since Duke University in the 1920s, all the way through to these kinds of studies. And now, beyond me, because I'm not a tech person, but harnessing virtual reality and now AI has come into everything. There's so much opportunity for advancing these studies even more. And they are right now developing even more as well. So skepticism comes into the methods that we apply to safeguard anything else being responsible other than potentially psychic functioning.
That is very
I know that was
interesting.
a lot to take in, sorry.
No.
That wasn't a soundbite. That wasn't a little... I'll give you a snippet. That was a long waffle. Sorry.
Now, we do have a question, I see.
Okay.
Let me see. I can show it. Hey, Cal, yeah, that's a nice word. A casual... There we go. Connecting principle. Do you have a view to regard to the paranormal is synchronicity in almost all personal interpretation?
I suppose there's so many day-to-day experiences that are, you could see them as synchronistic, that from a precognition to a telepathic experience with a relative, like, let's say, you're on a plane flight somewhere and all of a sudden you've got this excruciating pain in your arm and it just won't go away and you don't know where it's come from, and your brother or sister on the ground wherever they are has fallen and broken their arm, and you could ask, well, is that coincidence? Were you actually just so happen to have like a trapped nerve in your arm because of the way you slept the night before, but it's just really bad and it's causing these muscle spasms and the pain, and it's just timed at the same time they've broken their arm, and you've drawn that link. You've thought, how weird that when I was having pain, you have broken your arm. To interpret it that way would suggest some sort of telepathic interaction. But if we don't allow that interpretation, it's just, it's that coincidence element, it's that interpretation of things that actually you were due to have that muscle spasm because you slept that way. and they were doing something and just so happened to break their arm. They weren't watching what they were doing or where they were stepping. So you could interpret a lot that way, and actually the synchronicity has led to perhaps a false interpretation that your minds were reaching out and somehow interacting with each other when we don't need that at all. There's other more simplistic explanations than that. Some go way beyond that, where we've got the seeing of apparitions, and it could be that you see an apparition of someone that's a loved one, and they're clutching their chest, and then they disappear, and you learn that at the exact same time, that person, wherever they were, had a heart attack and died. So why has that happened? Why have you never had apparitions of that person or anyone else other than at that point when something so significant, such as them dying, happened? Or even other ones where we see apparitions of people we don't know and they suddenly disappear, and later on we discover who they are and that they were a person that at the time was dead, but they are known to other individuals. And the same could be said for precognition and stuff, where we don't know what this means ultimately. That there were premonitions en masse for Titanic and for the Aberfan disaster in Wales with the coal slick that covered the school that had all the children in, 9/11 and the tsunami. These were en masse where people weren't there, they weren't involved, they didn't completely understand what this premonition was or what it meant, and yet you've got so many people that are having them, and then all of a sudden it makes sense. And some of them are very vague, such as, oh, I was around loads of children, then all of a sudden it went dark and there was panic, all the way through to I saw coal in an avalanche coming down a Welsh mountainside, and it just consumed the school, and everyone was screaming, and it looked like this, and people were digging, and that's way more specific than the darkness and the children. So there's some that seem to go way beyond inaccurate appraisal of a day-to-day coincidence. It just doesn't have enough information, but we've tied the rest together and made it seem paranormal.
Yeah, clear answer.
Yeah.
Good.
We have another question from Gareth. Is Professor Chris Rose still doing experiments of the Gans field at Northampton University?
I think they've just completed a sequence of them. So we had 2 different Gansfeld projects running, and another one was based on diet and psychic abilities, but that was between Northampton and essentially Leeds. So we had to get 80 trials completed, and that was looking at vegans, vegetarians, and then people who had an all-rounded diet. So that's just finished, and I do think what Chris was just doing has finished. But we've got a permanent Gansfeld setup, so I know there'll be another project before long where we do open it up to the public, and we've invited many people before, people off of social media that were interested, and they've come to see the university, people that have done podcasts and they've taken pictures and then they've reported on it in their podcast what it was like, which is great, because then they're reporting on what is science actually doing. So that there'll be another round, and when there is, we'll stick it on social media, and if people are able to, please come along. Please don't be shy in sending us an email and taking part. You'll be made very welcome if you come and visit us at the university.
Cool.
That's cool. We have a question from Noreen, and she was interested in the flotation tank research. COVID happened, and I think she missed out on the results.
Oh no. Well, so yeah, did the flotation tank research happen? I know you're about to start just pre-COVID, as you discussed it with my good friend Anthony Peake. Tony Peake. Well, we had Tony Peake at the Society for Psychical Research at the last study day. Really well known as an author, and lots of his fans turned up as well to see some of that, so that was really good. So what happened with the flotation tank? Well, from 2016 to 2020, we ran a pilot in Nottingham, and we did a small scale study of it. Then we got our own flotation tank set up at the University of Northampton and ran a few minor trials with that. Essentially, it didn't work in terms of the location and the method. It just wasn't fit to run any studies with it. So then my PhD candidate, Kirsty Allen, who's incredible at networking and getting a foot in the door and meeting people, she based herself up at Broughton Hall, the Broughton Sanctuary, and managed to work with a flotation tank company that sorted out getting this health spa facility as part of the Broughton Sanctuary, the tank. And it's from there that we ran all these paired trials of 80 trials for her PhD. And so that phase is done. So again, we'll open that up again. There will be invites to come and have a go at a flotation tank, because we will do more beyond her PhD. She's just finalizing it now, and we're working towards her final exam, the Viva. But the outcomes, I can't say much at the moment because we haven't fully finished, but we have got all the data, and they were in a positive direction. They weren't as positive as perhaps we'd have liked them to be, but they certainly weren't completely sat on chance level throughout the entirety of what they were done. And we also found within the people that were used, some people that were star performers, just like JB Ryan was looking at with the Xena cards, where he had people that you can get on average about 5, 6 out of 25 on repeat, because that's what chance expects. Ryan was looking for his star players that were getting 10, 11, 12 or more repeatedly every time they were going through a deck of 25. One person who managed to get 25 out of 25 straight. And so he took those star performers and kept working with them. So flotation tank, positive direction, more to report on that, but could have been more positive than we like. But it is the first major run, first ever full set as well, of enough power to be seen as a full study. So everything before was a pilot. So this is our starting point, really. It's not an end point. So we've got more to do from here.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very
And
cool.
interesting.
Definitely.
Yeah.
We have another question from Tony. I think he left his caps lock on, but I can't even read the whole question.
What's your view on the connection between quantum mechanics and the influence of consciousness influencing reality when viewed, and the fact that consciousness itself, disembodied consciousness being a being, the direct influence of paranormal
Activity.
activity, sorry, cut off again. I have no idea, Tony. I don't deal with quantum mechanics or quantum physics as a psychologist. Most of my work is dealing with the bereaved day to day. And as I say, I'm a historian for the field and I'm in the lab. I wouldn't even pretend to say that I know anything about the beginnings of quantum mechanics. I could tell you a little bit about the history of the organization that produced the Journal of Paraphysics. But that's about it. People that you will get a far better answer out of. My PhD student, I'm very proud of, Mike Dorr, that I just mentioned, that did the diet study. He has just got a book coming out that I could look up in a second. But if you look at Michael Dorr, he's got a book coming out on questions of consciousness, the reality of consciousness. Dean Radin has done the forward for it. And besides that, I'm sure, Tony, you've read Dean Radin's books as well. There's one called Entangled Mind. And so you'll get far better answers from people like that who've made it their purpose to look into that than me. I can only point you in the direction of it. I can't provide you with an answer that would enlighten anyone.
Yeah.
All honesty.
Very, very clear. Very clear.
Yeah.
Noreen says thank you for your answer about the flotation tank. Phil has another question. How do you differentiate a paranormal experience from a neurological glitch?
I suppose that brings us back to skepticism again, and very carefully working through the day-to-day experiences that people report. There's a colleague again at Northampton, Louise Spires, Dr. Louise Spires, who looked at temporal lobe epilepsy and anomalous experiences, because she's had these experiences herself. She realized in her research that these go back to ancient civilizations and documentation. There's ancient tablets that seem to describe people having essentially a temporal lobe epileptic seizure. And some of these people, when you look to ancient Rome and ancient Egypt, they were seen as people that had this direct intervention from the gods. They are being given direct messages through these visions and voices that they're hearing, and sometimes premonitions of the future as well. Sometimes it seems that people can unlock this when they're on psychedelic reactants, such as LSD or ayahuasca or DMT. And so we know that sometimes we can kind of insert this little key of altered states into the brain and activate something. But the difference is when people have these visions and experiences they're having, what separates it from some sort of neurological process that is either an abnormality, a mental health aspect, or some sort of neurological glitch, as you've called it, Phil, compared to a parapsychological experience? And that would be the kinds of information that are received, or whether there are multiple witnesses to it, where there's some sort of external factor and it's not just purely subjective and it's in here, it's an internal vision. So the main thing we would look for would be what we call veridical information, in that the experience has provided information through that individual or what they've picked up on that they should not ordinarily know about. It's only through investigating that what they've said or what they've seen turns out to be true, but they claim that they had no idea in the first place. A skeptical argument to that is maybe it's cryptomnesia, and that you did know about it at one point. You heard it on the radio in the background, or the television over here, or some people talking over there, or a poster over there, and it went in and you've forgotten about it, and for whatever reason in that moment it surfaced. And that can be the explanation for why children present information of a former life, a reincarnation experience, that they'll say, well, maybe it's cryptomnesia. But that presents problems in of itself in how do you go about testing cryptomnesia and proving that that is a thing. So it's only a theoretical kind of memory idea that maybe these are hidden memories that have subtly gone in and they've subtly come out again, and you've got no idea where they came from, or you're adamant that that's the case, and actually they do come from somewhere. So that's the only thing that might divide that veridical parapsychological information from a memory issue that we're not fully aware of how to test or demonstrate, but it could be the explanation in principle.
Very clear.
So each case, you can't just take everything and say it's this. These people over here say they're seeing ghosts. Well, it must be this. You're giving a sweeping explanation to a lot of people, whereas each and every case may be very different as to why they think they've seen a ghost, or why it seems quite clear that they have seen something. That it's not just that they think, they have some sort of corroborative evidence or witnesses to say that they had. So what's going on there?
Yeah. And it's also an interpretation of your brain. If you see chaos around you, you try and make sense in your brain of the chaos. So, what did you see, a ghost or? We forgot one question from Andy. What's your view on EVP research outside of pareidolia?
Andy, and thanks for the follow recently. I saw you on Facebook. Thank you so much for that question. That one I quite like, because even though I've not been involved per se in EVP research, I have written on strange telephone calls. And I like the history of EVP, because Raymond Bayliss was technically the first kind of structured discoverer of EVP in a sort of a lab-based scenario where he set the conditions right. He was trying to rule out fraud and error, and he was working with a psychic, an astral projector called Attila Vonzele in California. They'd essentially made like a soundproof studio, and they got the reel-to-reel recorder, so the big tapes that we had like that, and you had to take the film off and knot it and attach it to the other reel so it would pull over as it was going round. And big clunky machines as well, when you clunked the dials to turn them on and off. But they were great, and they have actually got a lot of good audio quality on them. And they were recording on brand new. The cellophane came off, so it was a brand new reel. And then they would stick it on record in a soundproof box. And on playback, Raymond and Attila were getting bangs and raps and scratches and whispers. Where's that coming from? And so Raymond wrote about that as a letter to editor in 1959 for the Journal of the American Society for Psychical Research. He's not a parapsychologist. He's in some ways he's an amateur researcher, but he's a very sophisticated one because he's incredibly well read. He was a walking encyclopedia for the literature, Raymond Bayliss. His day-to-day job was as a landscape artist. In my house here, I've got a lot of his paintings that I've brought back from California and Las Vegas that I found over time. So I don't think ordinarily I would have picked that kind of artwork, but knowing it's his and done by his own hand, that's why I've started collecting that stuff. So if anyone has a Raymond Bayless painting, send it my way. I'll gladly take it off your hands. So I love that starting point, and there's an overlap with Friedrich Jurgensen, who makes the claim that he's discovered this EVP while recording bird songs and hears his deceased mother's voice on playback. He's got a background in opera singing and filmmaking and has a lot more contacts to the media. So him coming forward to the newspapers and saying he's discovered such a thing has got far more traction than Raymond Bayless in a very unknown journal that's to a select group of society members. That's not going to get attention. So Jurgensen gets this popularity for this discovery months later after Raymond's publication, but Raymond was working on this for 5 or 6 years before this came about by accident with Jurgensen. And then after that, we get Konstantin Raudover, who was doing this, and he published a book called Breakthrough that came with an accompanying LP, so you could play it and listen to this EVP as well. And then there's a long history after that of people trying different things, scholars being paid to do this for a time. David Ellis got the Perrott Warwick studentship through Cambridge University. So for 2 years as a student, he was looking into the psychology of electronic voice phenomena. And this comes all the way up to present day with Dr. Anne Winsper, who at the University of Central Lancashire, as it was called, it's now University of Lancashire, she did her PhD on the psychology of EVP. So that's probably the most recent kind of full study you can read on the internet, because everyone's PhD is open access. So in the book Paracoustics that I edited with Steve Parsons, there was a whole chapter I wrote on the history of EVP. I remember it took me a whole summer, and I'd laid out on a dining table all these different articles I found on EVP, and I tried to put them in time sequence order. So I've given a fair overview of what happened in the history of from Raymond Bayless and a little bit before to where we are now. So I quite like that quirky discovery and background research of EVP and parapsychology that certainly wasn't at the forefront. Parapsychologists generally weren't interested, but it's very much of parapsychological concern and a bit of physics and engineering. You know, where are we getting these voices from on a blank tape when recordings in a soundproof box? And I don't mean our modern day ghost hunters with a dictaphone in their hand, a digital recorder, walking around asking questions. That's chaotic. That's going to produce all kinds of audible anomalies and hearing things you think you're hearing when you're not. So auditory pareidolia. I mean, that's messy, really, really messy, and that's bad methods. You know, when we talk about skepticism applied to something, soundproofing everything, protecting the recorder, and then on playback there is something when you've exposed it to nothing. That's weird. That's really weird, because you've exposed it to nothing. Exposing the recorder to everything and then expecting something sensible in response, or how you separate natural things from unnatural things, doesn't work. But that's how TV's influenced people's kind of hobbyist interest on this, compared to someone who was a hobbyist in this, as I mentioned Raymond was, and yet carefully thought through this and then thought about, right, I need to write this up now and present it to the scientists and my peers to see what they think. And that did in some ways spiral after that.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was long-winded again. That was a
No,
lot.
No.
It's completely fine.
Yeah, and interesting, and many people should hear this because they are all doing the TV imitation of taking EVPs. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't work. No.
Absolutely.
You mentioned a couple of books. Well,
yes.
Yeah. How many did you write, actually?
Well, my first ever one off the back of articles was Telephone Calls from the Dead. And that is, it's like a volume 2 to Phone Calls from the Dead. I wasn't very imaginative with the title, clearly. I just added teller at the end. But it's a second study. The first study from 1979 looked at 50 cases and analysed them. I looked at another 50 cases and analysed them. But I also mentioned what's happened in the 30 years since as well. And now we're 45 years on almost from, or pretty much since the first. So Phone Calls from the Dead, the original, has has literally just come back. It took ages to sort out the rights between Rogo and Baylis's estate, because it was Rogo, D. Scott Rogo, and Raymond Baylis, who I just mentioned, who co-authored it together. So it's back out as of last year, and I've written the postscript, which brings everything up to date 45 years on. So if you were to read them in order, it's Phone Calls from the Dead, Telephone Calls from the Dead, get the new edition of Phone Calls from the Dead, and go straight to the postscript. And then you've got kind of 3 separate things. So that was my first. I then sandwiched a book together that was unpublished by Alex Tannis called Conversations with Ghosts. So I was glorified editor for that, essentially. I co-edited Paracoustics with Steve Parsons, so I wrote some of the chapters, and then we edited the whole thing together, and there was contributing authors. I edited the book Psy in Psychotherapy and provided the introduction, so that was an unpublished book by Alex Tannis. And I think that's it at the moment. I mean, I've done a lot of forwards and postscripts. I've done a forward for Paranormal Cornwall. I've done a forward for Haunted Castles of the UK with Roland Rotherham and John Mason. I did a forward for Psy Wars by Craig Wheeler about Ted Wikipedia and the battle for the internet. Right now I'm working on 3 separate book contracts, and I've had requests in today for me to review research papers, my day-to-day job and stuff, and I've said no. I'm learning to say no. I can't do that. I'm not doing a forward for this. I'm not doing that. I'm not reviewing this. I need to get these books out because it's been a long time since I single authored anything like that. I do papers all the time, but I need to be working on more books because I enjoy public interaction. I enjoy this. I love going out to places and actually doing public talks and stuff. And I've got so much to write. I've just collected, you can even see down there, there's notes on the floor from things and all things I'm working on. I need to put it together and advance some of the stuff. I should have written far more books than I have by this point, but I've just been so busy. Day-to-day universities just get so chaotic. And look how much the telephone has influenced me over time. One of the lamps that I've got over here is a telephone.
Oh,
Wow.
I like
With a
it.
spooky woo.
I like it. I like
I've got
it.
telephones everywhere. It's just become something that's dominated my life ever since writing that book.
Yeah, but that's,
And I hate
that's
mobile
amazing.
phones. I hate mobile phones. I hate using the telephone.
Yeah.
Ironically.
I know the feeling.
Yeah, you do.
We have another question. Psychology uses the term boundary thinness. What would you say are the cognitive setups that make a person more receptive to sensing things outside baseline reality?
Well, a number of things, Phil. You're going down a very complex route of questions, but one of them we mentioned earlier was psychedelic reactants. That could open up additional awareness to things. Another one is different personality types could be more receptive. We have a thing now called the highly sensitive person scale that we use quite a lot. We've used it in positive psychology. We use it now with the flotation tank research, such as it tells us a bit more about openness to experience. And sometimes the opposite of what you expect. Actually, the people with more anxiety and sensitivity to engaging in something get the more out of it than you expect, rather than being closed down to it. But the analogy I compare that to is the person who's always the bag and the coat holder at theme parks. Actually, if you force them to go in line, if you bear with them, if you just encourage them, they will get far more out of the ride than you, who is a veteran roller coaster rider. That they will get more of a buzz because the adrenaline's higher, but realizing they're safe and nothing's going to go wrong, and it brings you right back to where you started, and it's a rush, that endorphin hit. You get more out of the experience, and more's being processed. Another thing as well, our main principle for psi and psych-conduciveness is altered states. And Chris Rowe has written on this quite a lot. He has an excellent chapter in a book by Matthew Smith, who I've just been speaking to before this call. Matthew Smith did a book, an edited book on essays in parapsychology and psychology. And Chris Rowe has the chapter on psi and altered states. And when we look at all aspects of altered states, from the Gansfeld to meditation, to things like the flotation tank, to day-to-day things. There's a psychologist called Malay Csikszentmihalyi who wrote a book called Flow, The Psychology of Happiness. And when you're in day-to-day rhythms of things, washing the pots, engrossed in a favorite television program or a radio program or music, or doing something that's very routine, like driving the car and running a typical errand, you're normally in a state of flow where time passes by because you're so locked into what you're doing. And you go, oh, goodness, I didn't realize it was the time. When you're that engrossed, usually that's a nice, conducive state in which for a spontaneous thing to happen, or in the lab to get some good results, because we've got someone into either they're lost in what they're doing, they're so consumed, or like with the Gansfeld, they're hovering between being asleep and awake. We've got them into the hypnagogic state, but we've kept them there. They're not quite asleep. So if we tweak things, if we create an altered state of consciousness, it's somewhat similar to these day-to-day elements of flow, and we seem to get good results out of that. So Phil, I hope that answers your question, because I think that really is that thinness between being completely engaged in day-to-day activities and not having an experience, compared to one actually coming your way and noticing it.
Yeah, I think it was very clear to me. It was, at least.
Yeah.
And he says thank you, so I think it's a clear answer. In the meanwhile, we had another question from Keith. Could EVPs be bleed over word or sound from a parallel dimension?
I think with my skeptical hat on, we just want to stay very clear from that. I mean, that's like one of our last resorts of thinking about it. Now, if I was a physicist, I'd probably be more open to that idea when we don't know what's going on, when we can't find a conventional explanation. So one of the vice presidents of the Society for Psychical Research is Professor Bernard Carr, and he was one of Stephen Hawking's students. He didn't have very many PhD students. He was very selective in who he took on, but Bernard was one of them, and he had an interest in psychical research, and he still does now. And Bernard has even edited a book on multiverse, so hyperspatial models, and has even written in his presidential address about the 10th and the 11th dimension, and all these multiple dimensions beyond our third and fourth dimension that we're somewhat familiar with, all these other potential dimensions playing a role. Maybe that's why sometimes people see apparitions of living people, ghosts of living people. Maybe we've just stepped in and got a glimpse of a reality where someone was going to do something, change their mind, but it still played out briefly. And we got to see a glimpse of that before it drifted off into a reality we're not involved in and we can't see. And maybe that's why we see apparitions of the dead, because again, they might not be dead. We're just seeing a level where they were alive, and we've just got a glimpse of that. So it's not coming from here. We are just seeing and processing what's out there, and that reality is just showing itself to us. That's what they'd think. With EVP, we've got all these bangs, taps, scratches, what kinds of things, tapping of the microphone, not realizing it was too close to our clothing, and all sorts. There's so many areas that could go on. But if we're getting distinct words and voices, well, then we'll question, does it relate to any of us that are doing the recording, or what's it saying? So there's all these initial steps before we get anywhere near thinking it must be coming from another dimension. That's way over here, and we want to be here and stay there for as long as possible and look for the least amount of explanation needed to explain it. Otherwise, we'll just get too far away. And sometimes a parapsychological one might be here, but most of them will be here. There'll usually be a conventional explanation not very far away. It's called Occam's razor. I mean, this is the principle. So that skepticism razor, that you've got an onion, and onions have many layers to them. And you can take a razor blade, and if you were slicing the onion, you would take razor blade slithers, very, very tiny slithers. And you just want the least amount of those is usually the explanation, the correct explanation for what you're dealing with, rather than going through multiple layers. If you go through multiple layers, you've got to justify each one, why you're cutting over the next and the next, because you're saying, well, there we are, but that doesn't apply. There's another layer. Doesn't fit either. Doesn't explain it. There's another one. So we can sometimes accept a few layers, but we've got to justify it.
Yeah,
Yeah, very clear.
absolutely.
Finally, I can ask my question. there's gonna be how did you start doing or getting interested in parapsychology or the paranormal in that case?
Yeah, I suppose that's a sidestep from how did I start, because I suppose with parapsychology I needed an interest in it, and I did. So while I was doing all that acting and performing arts, we would go to the local library in town during school days once a week. So they would walk us down the road and we would go to the local town library. And I was in very small classes. There was like 12 people in my class, and I think I was one of 5 boys in the class. And we would always go to this one section where we knew there were books on Fortean phenomena, so after Charles Fort. So there were books that would talk about Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster and UFOs and stigmata and all these strange paranormal things, through to ghostly experiences and ghosts caught on camera. And that's where I think the main book that I discovered there was the Osborne Book of Ghosts, which is very popular. I mean, it's been reprinted recently, and my friend Reece Shearsmith did the forward for it. And that introduced me to the ghost hunter, Harry Price. So I got to learn about Borley Rectory and Jeff the Talking Mongoose, which was a case called The Haunting of Cashan's Gap, where this family in a remote farmhouse believed that they were being plagued and haunted by a hybrid talking mongoose called Jeff. And I found these bizarre. Besides that, I mean, I was looking at the ghost photographs and thinking, oh God, yeah, I can see a partial face or an arm. And, you know, years later, becoming a psychologist, I learned more about pareidolia. And at college, I studied photography for 2 years. And I spent most of my time in dark rooms processing black and white and infrared film. So I knew all about photographic anomalies and errors and manipulation. But still, the context of this is a well-known haunted location. Loads of people have had experiences here. They say they've seen a nun, and you know, the long kind of flowing habit and stuff like that. And look, we've got this strange shape here. Well, it ties into the story, just like we talked about with synchronicities and coincidence. And actually, you've taken one thing and married it up with another, when actually, you know, it's a stray hair just over the lens, and the lens is here, and you're focusing on something over there. So it's appeared bigger and blurred, and it's got reflected by the flash, and it appears like this long gown and like it's over here, but actually it was right here next to the lens. So all of that fascinated me. And so I'd always been interested in the day-to-day experiences where you've had a full-on interaction with a ghost. People have spoken to it. Other people had seen it. None of these people had spoken to each other. It had gone on for decades. So why are people having that same experience? And that's what really got me into it. So when I decided to do the psychology degree, I was adamant that if I did that, I would do it at a university that supported parapsychology. So I could specialize in that. I could explore that aspect of psychology the most. And I knew I really had to try hard to be good at some other areas of psychology, like at least research methods. But I suppose I found my niche with other areas that aren't widely studied, such as death. There aren't many psychology degrees that really cover much of death, dying, bereavement. Sex, that's a big thing. Everyone knows about sex. Sex is a popular thing, but again, it's not widely covered in psychology degrees, but I focused on that. And positive psychology, that's grown a lot now. But at the time I started doing it, there were very few universities just primarily having a unit or a module focusing on emotions and how we understand them and how we use them. Most people get annoyed or frustrated or think it's stupid if they overhear you in a pub when you talk about things like happiness, that it's the most misunderstood and under-researched areas of positive psychology. We know very little about happiness. We know a lot more about the other emotions, and yet happiness, you think everyone knows what happiness is, but there's so much difference between language and how language is expressing happiness, what we mean by happiness within that, whether there's different ways of expressing happiness in other cultures, appropriate situations in which you can express happiness. Is it really the same thing as joy or elation or laughter? When we react, that's the emotional reaction, the physical reaction to sometimes something really tickling us and it being funny. Or contentment. Is being content, is that happiness? So there's all these different word plays about what it is, but happiness is so delicate. It's like a butterfly's wings. It's fleeting. It doesn't last long. you aren't constantly happy. You have moments of peaks that make you happy. The best place we can be in is a nice constant contentment. So this is the thing that, I love that area of psychology, and it's a lot of trying to understand and get a philosophical grip on different cultures over time and our writing on it. But now, modern day, we go out and study it. So fine, run some surveys, see what people en masse think about it. And then, if you understand it enough, can you do some lab studies on it? Can you control happiness or love or anger, whatever it may be?
Yeah. Well, it makes sense to me.
Good.
Makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense. Now, I read something about Britain's X Files. Is that something like the X Files, as in the TV program, or what do I have to?
Yeah, it's kind of got that premise. It's off the back of some work and writing that my colleague, and I've not seen him in a long while, so if he's listening, hello. But Dr. David Clarke, he's at Sheffield Hallam University. He's involved in journalism and folklore, and I suppose they did base the series off the back of work that he'd done. And essentially he's been a main figure really for UFOs and UAPs. So we've got that term now. So unidentified flying objects and unidentified aerial phenomena. And so David was involved. He sort of appears quite a lot in the series as they brought it out. And there were a lot of aeroplane and UFO related cases, but they went into ghostly cases. They've gone into sea monsters and things like that, and conspiracies. And so I was brought on as a talking head again, because we're just like this and we're commenting on something else that's happened for parapsychology and for skepticism. And I've covered a few cases. The Aberfan disaster was there. The ghosts in St. James's Park, the headless ghost of a woman in St. James's Park in London. Urigella, I don't think we've covered that yet, so there's more episodes coming out in September. So the series isn't finished. They've just cut it in two, left a load of months, and there's another 2 or 3 episodes to come. And I did a few more cases. I can't think what they were. So this is the first series that they've really spread out. But right now, we are working on other projects. So I'm not just a talking head for things coming up. I am presenting for other things coming up in related projects to that. So I'm glad people are enjoying it, because I tiptoe between uncanny, and I've been a guest skeptic a few times on that and enjoyed it. But I've got colleagues that are far more involved in that. They constantly have Dr. Kieran O'Keefe as their main skeptic and figurehead for that. But as I was doing that, Britain's X-Files came along, and I'd finished with other series that I'd done before, such as Paranormal Captured. And I've enjoyed it. It's been really good. They've been great people to work with, and they're very passionate about getting these experiences understood and the science behind them. And I love it that where you've got something historical, they'll either find archival footage on it to show people what happened at the time, or they'll recreate it with actors as well, so the audience can really get an idea of what once took place. And these are genuine experiences at the very least that people say they had, and therefore they have genuine consequences, regardless of whether we can understand what really went on or not, whether, let's say, it's paranormal or not. It's the fact that these were real experiences to real people. So what did it do, and what do we know about them?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you study also abductions?
Well, with alien abductions, I haven't personally studied that. I've got colleagues like Professor Chris French. He's done uncanny as well. He's written on alien abduction experiences, especially for a parapsychology textbook by Robertson Groom, called Parapsychology, the Science of Unusual Experiences. So he has a chapter in there on abduction experiences. I think he's mentioned it too. Here you go, Chris, if you're watching, there's a plug for your book. His book, The Science of Weird Shit. That is the title. I'm sorry, it's what's written on the cover. Don't judge the book by its cover, but he's covered abduction experiences in there. And I think for the parapsychologist, again, it's because of, does it relate to sleep phenomena? Is it when we're going to sleep or waking up? That because these are people that watch more UFO programs or are interested in aliens, or they were a fan of the X-Files, that's their interpretation of the dreams getting mixed with reality, or even sleep paralysis as well, when they believe hands are pushing down on them and perhaps they're being operated and there's these strange beings around them. Whereas the ghost hunter, or the person that's interested in ghosts and spirits, might interpret it as a poltergeist or the spirits taking over them. So there's interest there. It's not something I've personally written on, alien abduction experiences. I've got an interest in it because, again, D. Scott Rogo, who wrote Phone Calls from the Dead, I'm his biographer, and I've delved into a lot of his work, and he did 3 books on this. He did one that had 2 different titles, but it was Alien Abduction Experiences or UFO Abductions, and they just switched the title. But it's an edited book of experts on these experiences. He did one called The Haunted Universe, about overlaps between psychic experiences and UFO type experiences, and whether they're one in the same, whether they're just a load of psychic experiences. And then he did one with Anne Druffel, and Anne Druffel did a lot of writing on UFOs, but their combined book was called the Tawangan Canyon Contacts. So that it was about a specific place where people had experiences, just like I spend a lot of time with the Bigelow family, and they owned for a time Skinwalker Ranch. And so that's one of the latest interest places, Skinwalker Ranch, and loads of experiences happening there.
Yeah, that's one of the most familiar ones
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of people's ears.
Yes, I've heard all sorts of stories of the family growing up there and what kinds of things were reported.
Yeah.
And again, not my domain. I'm not an expert. I've just sat in and listened. I'll
Yeah.
leave it to the experts to write about it, because I know people like David Clark and others know far more on the literature than me. I was at a book auction recently where a related organization was trying to move the books on to other interested scholars. And they did a bit of an auction for it for very little money, and loads came up on old books on UFOs. And I thought, shall I just buy them all and have them all together for someone, or do I keep them? And I just went, no. And it didn't interest me enough to do it, because, as we mentioned, I'm spinning so many plates and I'm delving into so many different subjects. Do I really want to add expertise on UFOs in there as well? No, I haven't got the time. I'm interested in listening, but I'm not an expert.
Yeah.
No, you're still a human being. You can
I'm a
only do so
human
much.
being.
Have you had an experience that would objectively regard as unknown or paranormal in your younger life?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever met anyone who hasn't, from believer through to absolute skeptic. There's always something, and I've met people who say, that they're a hard-nosed skeptic and say, I don't believe in ghosts, don't believe in them at all, absolute nonsense. But here's my ghost story. And you're like, okay, so you've set the scene. You want me to believe that you're rational thinking and you'll never have these experiences, but this one can't escape the net. It's caught you. So I've listened to all these kinds of ghost stories, from paranormal believers through to absolute skeptics, and I'm very much sat firmly in the skeptic seat. But I can relate to some. I've been to known haunted locations with the police in the past when they were looking at interest in ghost hunting, and also reports of break-ins for different things, and objects moving on their own on command, like rubble and stone, and it being warm when picking it up, and it coming from areas of the room where no one else is. There's only like me and 2 other people, and it scared them more than it's scared me. And it's just weird that it's moving on command. And that was years and years ago, because I used to be like every week spending my night inside a haunted location, or for days. There was a place called Clifton Hall where we went there week after week, and spending either all day there or all night there. We spent a long time with that. And then I suppose there was another one where, the only one that really stands out was, I must have been about 11 or 12, and I had this really strange dream, but it was very clear, of being stood in a queue, a line with my mother, and she's taller than me at the time, and it's semi-lit. You can see everything that's going on, but the light, you're clearly inside somewhere. It's not great lighting, and there's loads of people lining up for something. And in the dream, I look ahead thinking, what are we queuing up for? And there's a load of black London taxi cabs cut in half, like in the film Herbie, where the Volkswagen Beetle splits in 2. It's just the back, and there's loads of them just doing this. Made no sense to me. I hadn't got a clue what that was. I think I told my mother about it as well. As she came to wake me up in the morning. And a few weeks later, we go down to London with one of her ex-colleagues. My mum's a retired midwife, and it was with one of her retired midwife friends who'd moved down south. And she brings her son along as well, who's a little bit younger than me. And we decide to go and see some of the attractions in London. And we go to the planetarium. Now, if you go to the planetarium first, you can then buy tickets cheaper by going straight into the next thing, which is Madame Tussauds next door. So we got the whole package. We didn't just do that. We got the lot. So we see the planetarium. We go straight through into Madame Tussauds, and we see all of that. We see all the general celebrities and royalty. We go through the Chamber of Horrors, and then we come out. And then, without paying anything extra, there was an option to do a little bit more of the tour or leave. And we decided to do a little bit more of the tour, and we queue up for it. And it's only when I'm in the right place at the right time, saying certain things to my mother, that all of a sudden the conversation seems too familiar. Deja vu. I've been here before. And I realized this is from the dream. This is the exact point in the queue where I was in the dream. It's not a very well lit room. There's loads of people queuing for things. What are we queuing for? And I look, and it's a ride. And the ride is to sit in the back of a black London taxi cab and then be taken on a further tour of waxworks in that way. But I thought, well, that's not aided me in my survival or anything like that. It's not helped me. I've not averted disaster or it saved my life. It's very, very mundane. But I never saw any advertising for it. I never had any interest in Madame Tussauds. I'd never seen any magazines related to it or anything on the TV. You know, someone might argue cryptomnesia. Clearly you have, and you've forgotten about it, and it's come up. But it wasn't just kind of an idea of it. I was in the queue speaking about a certain thing to then realize I've done this before. This is the dream from 2 weeks ago I told you about. What are we queuing up for? Oh, the Black London taxi cab. It's a ride. So that was the weirdest one. It's the strongest one by far. That was very, very strange. So that's the only one I can relate to. And most people think that someone has got into parapsychology because of an experience. I would argue I didn't, because that rock stuff and the movement of objects and stuff was long after I was involved in parapsychology that I got to see that stuff. And that one dream precognition really didn't play on my mind or interest me. I just thought, oh, well, it happened. Interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll learn more about that when I study psychology. But I forgot about it for years until I started kind of reflecting on parapsychology and stuff like that and realized that, oh, that memory's not gone away. That was such a weird thing. And now I realize where it sits. It sits in these many other premonitions that people have had, where they can be day-to-day and they can be mundane, or they can be really big and save your life if you act on them in the right way. What about you guys? Did you have an experience that triggered interest, or did your just general interest then make you realize an experience was perhaps unusual?
No, mine triggered my interest.
Yeah, for me, almost the same, but I couldn't relate and explain the dreams I had, and the deja vu moments weeks, even months later. And we also have a small course in parapsychology. It's not a universal study over here. It's just a course. And I try to explain those dreams for myself, but I can't. I really can't.
Who is the course run by? I might know them if they're involved in parapsychology.
I have to look up his name.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I completely forgot it. Titus Rivas. He's a Dutch.
I know the name. The name. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting, but it didn't explain everything. So
If you're still in touch, tell him I said hello.
I will. I still have him on Facebook, still friends with him. So I will send him a message. You said hello.
Good.
Absolutely.
Everyone knows each other in parapsychology pretty much.
I just want to say it's a small world.
It is a
It
small world.
is.
Yeah.
It is a small.
Well, let's look at it in context. There's probably about 250 to maybe 300 at a push parapsychologists worldwide. Most of those might be retired. Another large proportion do other things that they're contracted to do, and the studies they do in parapsychology are a side interest. I'm one of the very few that is fortunate that pretty much every day this dominates my work. I'm dealing with PhD candidates working on parapsychology studies. I'm collecting data on parapsychology. I'm writing on parapsychology. I'm talking on parapsychology. I'm at a public event on parapsychology, or I'm in the media doing something on it. That's very, very fortunate that, through my kind of idle persistence of doing something people said don't, when I actually want to do acting, I've actually landed here and generated a living from doing this, which is really, really fortunate. But even so, people get in somehow, and everyone becomes very known to each other because of conferences and seeing each other year on year, and you know who to reach out to. You need this sort of belief scale. Well, I know who wrote that, I know who can tell you all about it. Boom, you're in contact. Who did that haunting investigation? Oh, that was so and so. Well, let's put you in touch, and everybody knows each other.
It's very handy.
It is, definitely. Phil is very rich on questions, I noticed.
Yeah, well done,
I
Phil.
love it.
You go, Phil.
So
Let's see.
did Jeff run rings around Harriet or Nandor Fodor? And did you see similarities with the Enfield case? With Harry, so if we remember, Harry went to Cashin's Gap on the Isle of Man first, and he'd gone there with Richard Lambert, who co-authored the book The Haunting of Cashin's Gap with him. In all honesty, Richard Lambert was the main author of it, and Harry kind of came in with editorials for it, and Harry kind of gets the main name for the book. It's very scary. You know what? I'll show you an old copy of it because I've got it here. There's a few copies down there, but this is beautiful, the old cover. So this is the original dust cover and a sketch of Jeff. So Harry Price and R.S. Lambert, Richard Lambert. And in recent times, they've done this beautiful, I've forgotten what publishing company it is. I can tell you, Gill Emmott, Guill Emmott, and it's number 9 or number 6 on it. But they've done this beautiful cloth-bound reprint.
Cool.
With an extensive introduction by Christopher Joseph, which is really good. And there's such beautiful drawings in there of Jeff. So, don't try and hunt down the very expensive, like hundreds of pounds, 1936 edition. Find this one. Or Christopher Joseph's book that's just called Jeff, G-E-F. And that's way more extensive than this and tells you the whole story. So check out Christopher's book, Jeff. You'll find that as a paperback. Really, really good. I reviewed it for the Journal of the SPR years ago. So Harry goes there first, and he doesn't see anything of Jeff in all of his visits. He sees evidence of perhaps something there, and if anything, when Voiri, the daughter, is talking, she's holding up like bits of string and stuff in front of her mouth whenever you can hear Jeff talking in this like really gruff voice, as though they believed that she becomes skilled with ventriloquism and she was throwing her voice. There's evidence of paw prints in plaster and teeth and hair, but the paw prints are weird because there's 3 sets of paws. At most there should be 2, front and back being different, but 3, and so they're questionable. The hair was analysed and it didn't appear to come from a mongoose. It seemed to be hair comparable to a sheepdog. They live on a farm. They had a sheepdog. And then besides that, there's photographs of Jeff, because Harry Price gave Voiri a camera and said, well, since Jeff is attached to you all the time, could you take pictures of Jeff? And so these are the kinds of pictures that we've got. So that's meant to be Jeff there.
Okay.
But it just looks like a bit of wood.
Yeah.
A fence post,
like
a rotten fence post stuck out of the ground. Other times he looks like a stuffed, like a taxidermied cat, like on a fence. Incredibly questionable. And yet other researchers that Harry sent along, I think Captain MacDonald was one of them, and some people from the newspapers, 50% of the people that went out to try and see evidence of Jeff say that they saw or heard something. The other 50% say they didn't see anything at all and were very skeptical of either Voiry or the whole family's intentions. So sort of shrouded in mystery. Nandor Fodor, I'd need to go back and read into a bit more of what Nandor's opinions were. He'd written in them in a few different sources. There were a few articles, and Between Two Worlds, I think, was his book, where he's got a whole chapter on Jeff. I can't honestly remember what his follow-up was, but I think it was just as skeptical as Harry Price's. There is a film that came out with Simon Pegg and Christopher Lloyd from Back to the Future and the Addams Family of all people, and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. He plays Harry Price. And I was so hoping I'd enjoy the film. I really didn't at all. I hated it. It was a you could have made it truthful and you could have made it scary, like the adaptation of The Woman in Black from the book to the theatre to the film. The film adaptation with Daniel Radcliffe with Jane Goldman writing that screenplay, it's a 12. It's rated 12 and it's terrifying.
Yeah.
Absolutely terrifying. And so and that's fictional. It's got a basis of truth, because The Woman in Black it completely matches an early Society for Psychical Research case called the Morton Ghost, which was later known as the Cheltenham Ghost. And it was all based at a place called St Anne's House in Cheltenham, which is still there to this day. And the Woman in Black figure was very similar to how this apparition in the Cheltenham Ghost acted. So with Jeff, Nandor Fodor is portrayed as the main character in The Curious Case of the Talking Mongoose film. So Simon Pegg plays Nandor, and he doesn't seem overly impressed with what's happening, and it's made out that the entire community or the family are trying to dupe him, and maybe that's what was happening with Harry Price. But ultimately, I would say that if any argument comes about, you have got to admit that the case ended on a big question mark. It was never fully resolved as to what was going on. It was never fully demonstrated that Voiry was creating it. It was never fully demonstrated that the whole family was creating it. If these things are Jeff, like the wood or what we see on a fence, we never got to see that object up close to prove whether it was Jeff or whether it was actually a bit of wood or a cat that had been stuffed after death. But the other elements, the paw prints and the hair, don't match up. So, Phil, your original thing of running rings around, I don't think it was Jeff running rings around. The evidence is pointing towards Voiry and her parents probably running rings around people. And it encapsulated a whole community, a very remote community on the Isle of Man, where gossip got around of this talking mongoose. It scared the bus company enough because they believed Jeff was hanging on to the underneath of the number 9 bus, I think it was, and getting a free lift around the island and listening into people's private conversations, that the bus company put electrified plates on the underneath of the bus to stop this mongoose, or mongooses if there were more, hitching a free ride. That's how much they believed this was happening. And so I think the family perhaps were maybe running rings around. Certainly, if Jeff was real, then he was a massive trickster, and he said it. I'm a trickster, I'm a spook, I'm a ghost, I'm all these things. He claimed to be a variety of different things. It's a very, very strange case. So, film guys, if you're listening, I don't think the film will kind of appease you as much as either the original report or go to Christopher Joseph's book, just GEF. I know it sounds like Geff. It's pronounced Jeff the way he said it. So check that out. It's full of newspaper reports. It gives you the whole story. It's weird. And I love it. I love it, love it, love it. I think it's such a weird Harry Price case.
Yeah. I am going to look into it because this is the first time I heard it. When you started talking about it, I was like, I've never heard of this. This is very interesting.
Oh, yeah.
But the picture you showed me, I was like, that's a log or something.
Yeah. Get it. Get Jeff. Get Jeff first by Christopher Joseph, and then I can send you an email. I can make sure you've got a link to getting this lovely. It's beautiful. Not many things come out as a cloth-bound book anymore, but I think it honors the scarce original now really, really well. So yeah, this will tell you in detail everything they did and what happened.
Cool.
That is cool. Yeah, I really have to look into that. Phil says I have the original. He has the Christopher. Yes,
I've got
this one.
I've got four of them in this house, and one of them belongs to a colleague, Dr. Kate Cheryl, so she's going to get that very soon. But I own three of them, and Christmas Ghost by Harry Price, which is very scarce.
Cool. But it doesn't surprise me. I see all the books behind you. And it
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
there's a few.
does not surprise me in 1 minute.
I like books, but you topped me.
They're expensive. If I get an opportunity to buy one, it's an investment. Of course, I'll get another.
Yeah,
It is,
true.
but not on my age, because the kids will say, "Oh, that's mine, that's mine, that's mine."
That's when you need to put a book plate in it and say it's got my name on it. It's definitely mine.
Yeah, for sure.
I've started doing that more because as people I admired and was really good friends with in parapsychology have died, sometimes I've ended up with books of theirs, or they've given me their ones they don't want anymore. And they had a habit of having stickers at the time saying ex libris, and it's got their name on, or their own handwriting. And I had a stamp made up. I love ravens, and I love a bit of gothic and that kind of decoration for the home. Downstairs is very dark and gold and black, and got a few raven models and bats and stuff like that. But my book stamp, if anyone ever sees it, it's beautiful. It's got a raven on it and some flying in the background, and says ex libris, my publishing name, Callum E. Cooper. And it says, black is the raven and black is the rook, but blacker the knave who steals this book. I love it. It's a nice
Cool,
little stamp.
cool.
Wow, that is very
And so
cool.
even with my old ones, I've stamped next to these people that are long since gone now, and I'm next to it. And I
Yeah.
just love this idea that whoever gets this book beyond me after my time, they'll see who's owned it over time. And I like that. I think that makes
That
it
is
more
cool.
valuable, knowing that it's had a history and it's been in the hands of different people.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, definitely.
absolutely. Do we have time for the last comment? I'm
Go
looking
for
at
it.
you.
Yeah, sure.
It's from Noreen.
Shall I read it?
Yeah, go ahead.
I recently met up with Anthony Peake, so Tony Peake, we mentioned him earlier, and his wife for coffee, and asked him if he knew how the flotation tank research went, and he said he would ask you for me. I can tell him no longer needs to now, as I've had the question answered. Well, there we go. I'm pleased, but Noreen, please watch this space, and especially if we put out a call out, because you'd be very welcome to come to Skipton in North Yorkshire and have a go with the flotation tank. And we'd love to get Anthony up there. I don't know if he's been to Broughton Sanctuary. We've got, there's an event actually coming up, if I quickly look at it, going on at the Sanctuary from, let me give you the dates, the 26th to the 30th of October. It's the Science and Consciousness Weird Sci event at Broughton Sanctuary. So if you look that up or go on my Facebook and other outlets, they're selling tickets now. And it's between the Weird Experience Lab, the Monroe Institute, and the Sci Games. So that's happening right now. So look it up, and hopefully anyone that visits will get to see our flotation tank set up there and get to meet Kirsty, who's been running it. So she can take your names and emails for participating in anything in the future and enjoy the sanctuary. It's a beautiful location, wonderful people, so relaxing. It's got a health spa facility and a pool and everything, incredible food, and you'll just meet some really nice, like-minded people from all kinds of walks of life and science.
Cool.
Absolutely
cool.
cool.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think we're finished. I think we're through every question right now.
Yeah.
There's only one question left.
Cool.
If people would like to follow you, where can they follow you?
I've been trying my best. They say if you want to do well on Instagram, do 3 posts a day. I can't keep up with that, but I'm trying my best. Are you trying? I mean, I'm trying.
I tried. I gave up.
I'm going to have to
Facebook.
do some silly video of something that suddenly gets 1 million followers because it's me falling down the stairs or something like that with some silly music behind it. I don't know. But I'm doing that. So I'm on Instagram, and I think it either says Professor Cal Cooper, or usually the handle is at Callum E. Cooper, which is, my books are usually in that name, and it's how academics typically write their names to distinguish yourself from another Callum Cooper. And there are other scientists with Callum Cooper as a name, so the E, my middle, is in there. a lot of my public work, everyone knows me as Cal, so it's there. But you'll find me as either Cal or Callum E. Cooper. My website is callumecooper.com. It's undergoing a reboot, so my website manager's working on it right now. But TikTok, I'm on there under the same handle, and Facebook, it's a private Facebook account, so I do vet people coming in, but I only put out stuff about me and my work and events that I'm at anyway. And so that's just down as Cal Cooper. And most people from, you know, all kinds of interested communities, they've got so many mutual friends with me. I can tell it's because I've been on a podcast like yourself and stuff, and people have added me as a result. So Instagram, I'm trying to make more of my main place, but Facebook works as well. Cal Cooper or Callum E. Cooper.
Good. Great. As always, I will put every link I can find about you in the description of Spotify and YouTube.
Oh, great. Yeah.
So does Mary. So everybody can click the link and end up at your pages.
Well, if you've got YouTube, so I would add as well, my close colleague, Dr. Jeffrey Mishlove, if no one watches it, please subscribe to New Thinking Aloud. So that's his channel, full of incredible lectures with parapsychologists, past and present, and other scientists. I've done a few. I'm meant to be a co-host, but I haven't done pretty much anything. I'm on a number of episodes, but I haven't filmed one myself because I've been so engrossed with the Californian Institute for Human Science. That was Jeff's baby, and he set up us getting a parapsychology program there for master's and PhD study, distance learning. And I've become the main person at the controls doing that and pushing all the buttons. So I've been engrossed making sure that's up and working. And, you know, I'm teaching tonight from 11 till 1 a.m. With Jeff. But I hope to get more involved with New Thinking Aloud again in the future. So even so, I'm associated with it. Check out New Thinking Aloud. It's like a free course in parapsychology. If you have not got the time to study parapsychology or the money to, you know, go through some CPD course with, you know, someone that's known in parapsychology that's teaching it, or even through to master's or PhD study, just watch New Thinking Aloud and pick a topic, pick a person, and watch a lecture. And it will lead you to books, lead you to all kinds of books that you can buy and read.
Cool.
Yeah. Cool. Very cool.
Sorry, Phil. He asked were there similarities to Enfield with Janet. Sorry, I missed out that second part of it. I'll just quickly say it was like any other poltergeist case in some regards when there's a family involved, in that a lot of the skeptical commentary around it, and also what we see in various documentaries, would suggest that the kids are running rings around Maurice Grosse and Guy Playfair. But we have to remember, when you read the book This House is Haunted by Guy Playfair, which is only a quarter of the full extent of reports and files on that, there's so much more in the SPR archives, that the house was sometimes empty. They'd sent the family away and stuff still happened when it was empty. So as much as the kids were young and they were living with two psychical researchers trying to day by day document things, and of course they were going to commit pranks, they were even caught out for committing pranks. There are some very curious episodes where they're not involved, or it seems to be beyond the capabilities of a 10, 11-year-old who is very skinny and not very strong. And things like the oak kitchen table flipping over was one. I think the cast iron fireplace being ripped out of the wall and one of the bars bending, which the adults tried. They couldn't bend those gas pipes by hand. I think those are very curious elements. And I had colleagues that visited like a few times, like Tony Cornell, who was very skeptical of what the children were doing, and he loved to get playful with kids and take along water balloons and silly masks and just join in the fun. But he was a very serious investigator, and Alan Gold. And so that there were other people that came in to see that something was up, and it stood the test of time within the SPR archives. I think too much dramatization, and especially recent films like is it called The Conjuring, where they suggested the Warrens, Ed and Lorraine Warren had got some. Ed and Lorraine Warren had no particular involvement with Enfield. They turned up for a day and were told to go away by Guy Playfair. It's all completely dramatized, and they weren't researchers, they weren't parapsychologists. A nuisance as far as I'm concerned. And so it's this dramatization that ruins it for public perception of what actually happened. But I suppose, Phil, similar, you know, the activity and the scenario and the psychodynamics of the family, it is becoming like a battlefield. It's very chaotic to know what's actually going on when there's bullets flying here and Lego bricks flying there, and I'm merging the battlefield with the actual home, but all sorts is happening. So what's actually going on? What's fact from fiction? It's tricky when you're out in the field doing that and you're watching something as it's happening. You're actually part of the event, rather than being a bystander and viewing it after the fact. They're two very different things. So it's a very good point to make between Jeff and that haunting case and a family dynamic to Enfield many years later. That's the best I can do in the time we've got left. Yeah, there's all sorts going on. We could do a whole episode on stuff like that, but that's my brief summary.
Yeah. Your mic is off.
Mine?
No, Shane's.
No, I was talking, and the thing didn't unmute me.
Oh.
So I was like,
I thought I was doing that.
Yeah, you can do it as well.
everything went right until this point.
Yeah, a blue pie.
Always something. What I was saying when my mic was still muted, that means you have to come back and we have to make an all new episode about that topics.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
there's all sorts.
Yeah.
When we've got more on the flotation tank, that'd be great. I've got to film this TV series coming up, and we can talk about what that's about when I'm allowed to say about that. There's so many things we can talk, and I'll tell you what I'm up to, and you can decide what you want to talk about.
Oh
Very
yeah, sure.
cool.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I'm loving the Ghostbusters stuff in the background, by the way.
Thank you. That's my sweater, but it was too small. Doesn't fit me. But it was the last one, and I was like, I need that one.
I've got one that's kind of like, it looks weathered, like on the side. You know when Ghostbusters 2 starts and the car needs some repairs, and it's dirty and it's fading. I've got a slightly like it's had some time on the t-shirt, but it's made like that's my favorite one rather than the crispy clean logo as they started. But I always liked, because I grew up with Ghostbusters 2 just because my mother had recorded it off the TV but without pausing between the adverts. So I remember watching this 2-hour long Ghostbusters 2 because it had every commercial of Heineken beer and car adverts to Peter Gabriel singing Sledgehammer and instant mashed potato adverts with the robots. It had everything of the time in 1990. And I just always remember that symbol with the ghost doing that. And so that for me was my Ghostbusters symbol, because I didn't have a recorded copy of the original Ghostbusters. So I watched Ghostbusters 2 far more than I watched Ghostbusters, the original.
Yeah.
Happy memories. I love the pink slime in that, the mood slime, and the courtroom scene by far, with the fact that the judge is so arrogant and not listening to anything they've got to say, especially when it's bubbling over. I love that. And then the Scoleri brothers in electric chairs going, happy memories as a kid. I used to put a backpack on, and the straps that dangled down to tighten them, I used to pretend they were the plasma gun, and just any backpack would become a proton pack. That was fun. And again, that I loved this film, but I love many other films. So that did not influence me in the slightest in getting to parapsychology. That became very much a serious science. Whereas I didn't see Ghostbusters as one and the same thing. I just later on things clicked with me saying, oh, yeah, I see that connection now. But it's not what got me there. It's just I love that as a separate thing.
Yeah.
And appreciate the overlaps.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Kel, thank you so much for joining us. It has been amazing.
My pleasure. It's good to meet you both.
Good to meet you as well.
Yeah.
Definitely. And hopefully we will see you again.
You will do. And thank you for all the questions from everyone. Some really tough ones there as well. And some nice familiar cases that I'd not thought about in a while. So thank you, everyone. Yeah, do follow me on social media and check out the books, especially Telephone Calls from the Dead and the new Phone Calls from the Dead. It's back out, guys. So you've got the full story again. It was very scarce to get hold of.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah.
Well, you said thank you already, so let's us say thank you as well. Thank you so much for interacting with us and joining us tonight. As always, we're going to go into back, and I'm going to end with a little bit of music, and then we stop the live, and we will see you next week. No,
Wonderful.
Friday. We are live again.
We are back on Friday, and we have a special guest.
Yep.
put it also in the events on our like page, but we managed to get Jeff Conco in from Ghost Adventures, so join us.
Yep. Same time as always.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's it. All right. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining us, and we will see you Friday.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.
Stack, fake the unseen crowd. Fingers tapping on the veil too loud. Voices from the cracks in the floor. Shadows bending where light won't go. Chasing truth in a haunted show. Are they real or something more? Psychic dreams or skeptics grin. Ghosts of questions circling within. Answers vanish before they land. Investigators with their tools in hand, talking to the dark like it understands. Spirits rising from the sand.